Welcome into Chicago Bears Now. My name is Harrison Graham. We are live earlier than normal here on a Monday. Usually we go live around 4 o'clock Central Time. It is currently 10 till 2 o'clock because we heard from Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles in a joint press conference a little bit ago, and then followed by interim head coach Thomas Brown. I've got lots of reaction that we're going to get to here on today's stream, so appreciate everybody for rocking and rolling with us, tuning in to today's show. Let's get the comment section flowing a little bit. Shout out your city. Let us know where you guys are tuning in from. Let me get this fan turned on here, Cullen. And then we'll be good to go. And, yeah, certainly an interesting day. We're going to get into it all. But, yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. Not the most inspiring press conference I've ever heard.
I was going to say, did it answer all the questions or did it create more questions from this press conference?
I think it created more, or it was just kind of – well, here's the problem. They blocked off about 25 minutes for this press conference, 11:45, because then Thomas Brown was going to speak at 12:15. So, go until about 12:10, 5-minute break in between, then Thomas Brown. Well, Kevin Warren talked for 7 or 8 minutes in an opening statement, and then Poles did the same thing for 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, that took up 40% of the time allotted, so I don't even think they took enough questions. I think there were some certain questions that weren't asked that needed to. Not a single person in there asked, is Thomas Brown a legitimate candidate to be the permanent guy? I don't know if it matters that much if that was asked or not, but yeah, we're going to dive into it all. But, man, I got to say, I'll just say this here. I've seen Ryan Poles talk a lot publicly. That was maybe I don't want to use the word weak because I don't think that's fair. That was the most lethargic I've ever seen him. And I get it. He wanted Flus to be his guy. He believed in him to be his guy. And, he's probably feeling the heat right now, even though Kevin Warren said he's the GM moving forward, all that stuff. But it's like, that happened on Friday, Cullen. I could get it if they spoke that afternoon and kind of rushed this whole thing. Like, if he'd be a little down in the dumps, like, man, this didn't work out, and I doubled down on this guy and it didn't work. Dude, you had the entire weekend. Like, you got to have a stronger presence there, in my opinion, today. I don't want to be overanalyzer press conference guy, but like, you needed strong energy and unification there. And I thought Warren, for the most part, was pretty good.
Yep.
But Poles, that was underwhelming, to say the least. I don't know. We'll see how the next few weeks play out, and we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of what they talked about. But that was disappointing, in my opinion. Todd goes, Poles was embarrassed. He trusted Flus and trusted him with Waldron. He wanted Flus to be the guy. Now Warren is going to lead the ship. And, yeah, and that's the poll question. Like, who's in charge? And we'll kind of get into what was said, but also get into what could actually be a reality here moving forward over these next 5 weeks, then on into the offseason as they try to find their next head coach. All right. A lot of sponsors to thank today before we get into it all. Shout out to Game Time for sponsoring today's show. If you want to go check out a Bears game, a Bulls game, Blackhawks, concerts, sporting events, Game Time is the place to go. Just be sure to use Game Time Picks, and you are going to kind of narrow down the search when you're buying those tickets. It's a feature within the app. It's absolutely awesome. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms do apply when you sign up, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS. So get $20 off. Terms do apply. First time only for that $20 off, code CHATSPORTS. Get out of the house. Go to a concert. Go to a sporting event. Go check all of that stuff out. We're also sponsored by PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy at prizepicks.com/CLNS. When you use the code CLNS, you're going to get a $50 bonus when you play for just $5 if you're a new customer. So create an account, use our code today for that opportunity. Here's an example of what a lineup could look like. 2 players. I like Josh Jacobs to find the end zone on Thursday night. Lions defense pretty beat up. As you guys saw, a lot of guys went down on Thursday. That's a goblin pick. It's a little easier to hit that one there. Jameson Williams touchdown is a what's the other word? Demon pick. Thank you, producer Colin. Those are a little harder to hit, but kind of evens out there since I went with the Goblin on Jacobs. JMO's due for a touchdown. Been a couple weeks. $5 entry to win 15, but again, win or lose, if you're a first-time customer, you're going to get a $50 bonus when you play for just $5. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. And lastly, Rocket Money. Looking to cut back on your spending, looking to really take your finances to the next level in terms of understanding where you're spending, where you can save, where you can cut back. Rocket Money is going to help you do all that. Where they really specialize is helping you cancel subscriptions you no longer want. Because what they'll do is they'll list out all of your subscriptions, what you're paying for on a monthly and annual basis on one screen, and you'll realize you're probably spending way more on services than you either A, knew, or B, would like to. I know for me, when I got going with Rocket Money, there were a couple services I didn't even know that I had. They were just like one-time sign-up deals for, a free trial, or I needed it to watch some certain event that I just forgot about, and I was getting charged on a monthly basis. No longer you can identify which ones you want to cancel, click the cancel button, follow a few more steps with a few more clicks. They will handle the rest for you. They'll deal with customer service so you don't have to. A lot of benefits to Rocket Money. Stay on top of your finances. RocketMoney.com/Bears now to download the app today. Get started with Rocket Money. All right, appreciate our sponsors. Couple super chats here. We'll get started shortly. The Polish Hardware Store, Ben Johnson, next Bears head coach. He'd still be my top guy. Obviously, you got to figure out if he's someone that can command a room. I think that's really the one big question with him, Colin, that you really have to do your due diligence on. If he checks that box, I think I'd feel pretty good about making him the guy.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think Ben Johnson's going to be coveted by not just the Bears, but a lot of different teams in the offseason that need a head coach. And look, I mean, no candidate's going to be perfect. I mean, even you could argue Jim Harbaugh last year. I mean, there was obviously the big question of, hey, can he win big time in the NFL and stuff like that, and just, different, schematical things there. But ultimately, look, Ben Johnson is going to be the biggest name, the biggest fish in the pond, so to speak. And I think the Bears should be wise to make him a priority. Obviously, don't discredit Thomas Brown. Interview him in personal and interview other candidates. But Ben Johnson would be my number one guy as well.
Yeah, and look, that could change. That could evolve. I did put out a top 15 list over the weekend, a video, so subscribe, go to the content tab. You'll be able to see it right there. The thumbnail says Flus replacements on it, so you can find it right there. Depressed Bears fan, Poles was mad that he had to fire his BFF. I don't know if he was mad. I mean, he admitted today that, look, at the end of the day, we lost. We couldn't get over the hump too many times. We lost late too many times. So I don't think he was mad that he had to fire him. I think he was more mad that it turned out the way it did, that he was wrong in the guy he chose. If he wasn't sure that it had become crystal clear that you had to fire him at this point, that would be concerning. I don't think that's the case. I think he knew that it had to be done. I think he's more of, maybe he has regret. Maybe he regrets not making a change last offseason. Who knows? But I know that was not an A-plus performance from Ryan Poles at the presser today. So, got to pick himself back up. There's time here, and you got to regroup, and you got to regroup fast because, I know we're always hyperbolic in these things. You see it in politics all the time. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. I will say this, though. I do think this hire, you could argue, is the most important in the history of the Bears because it feels different with Caleb calling it than it did with Mitch after his rookie year, or even Justin after his rookie year. There was hope with those guys. I feel pretty confident that if you nurture this guy the right way, coach him the right way, and have the right people in charge, you can have a top 10 quarterback, maybe even a top 5 quarterback in this league for the foreseeable future. But do you trust the Bears to do that? Like, I don't. It's kind of hard to. I mean, I don't know how you could, but I do think Caleb has shown more in his rookie season than any of the prior guys have, and that's the reason to have hope. But it's also gives you more to lose, and why it is so important to get this right. Because if you don't, I mean, it's an all-time missed opportunity. Because I do think that Caleb would be someone that, if he left and went elsewhere, I do think he would thrive, whereas with the other guys, you didn't necessarily feel that way.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assumption. I mean, Harrison, if you think about it, like in our lifetime, we're both around the same age. If you think about, for sure, no doubt about it, they were number one overall picks for basically the entire draft process. Like, looked at as generational type guys. I mean, you've got Andrew Luck, you've got Trevor Lawrence. I would argue Caleb, maybe not as high as those guys regarded coming out, but he's still relatively in that class.
For 2 years, he was the number one pick.
Exactly. So, and you look at those guys' careers. Andrew Luck, because of Brian Grigson and, the Colts' incompetency in their front office, I mean, he basically had to retire early because they could never build an offensive line to protect him. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, that's been a shit show in Jacksonville from the moment he got there with the whole Urban Meyer and, Trent Baalke situation. So, yeah.
I also think part of that is I do think with Trevor, I do think there's – and the Jags don't have a ton of what's the word? Cachet, if you will.
No, for sure.
I also do think Trevor has, he's not improved. Like, I actually think they've done a decent job of getting him some pieces. But yeah, I mean, he had to start with Urban Meyer.
Exactly.
The point you're making, I agree with, is a lot of the common denominators in these situations is whether it's personnel around them, coaching, front office, whatever, these situations go awry because they don't end up being ideal situations. Now, I think Caleb has some talent around him, obviously. There's some good players here and whatnot, but the Waldron thing, and the more you hear about it, is just an embarrassment. I mean, the recent reports calling her that all the way back in OTAs, the players were like, this guy ain't it. That's a major issue. That is a major, major issue. So,
yeah.
You can have all the talent, but if you have coaches that players literally never believe in, that's hard to overcome. That's really hard to overcome.
And I feel like in a lot of player interviews, too, I mean, they'll sit there and they'll get asked, hey, how long does it take before, a draft pick, if he can play or not? And a lot of players will say, roughly around 2 practices. It doesn't take a while for these guys to know whether you get it or you don't. And for Shane Waldron to have those red flags immediately right away, I mean, that's very concerning.
Well, I think it's why guys like Urban Meyer work in college but not in the NFL. You can I don't want to use the word fool, but you can run a different type of ship when you have 19-year-olds. Like Keenan Allen in year 12 coming out and being like, yeah, he was just too nice of a guy. This and that. We didn't really think he was a great communicator. He doesn't care. He's just going to tell it how he sees it. The sophomore at Ohio State isn't going to go public with his thoughts on Urban Meyer. So I just think that's a major problem. And yeah, I mean, that's why you got to get this one right, because I heard Lance Briggs the other day, former Bear, he said from the first meeting with Mark Trestman, he knew he wasn't the guy. These guys know. They know what a leader looks like. And more importantly, they know what a leader doesn't look like. So you better get one, because if you don't, it's going to be a massively wasted opportunity given the talent of this young quarterback. Adam Downing, and by the way, we got our new Hall of Fame helmet here. We'll go $50 if anybody wants to get on there. We still have to get the new stickers on for the first people who got on during the watch party this week. We will do that, but helmet just came in 20 minutes before the show, actually. Adam Downing says, if we want to understand Caleb Keenan force feeding, rewatch Hard Knocks episode 3. I'll have to go back and look. Hard Knocks is such a blur at this point. There's been so much that's gone on. I will say this. Keenan's looked a lot better the last couple of weeks. I think he's gotten a little more healthy. The route running's been crisper. There's been good rapport there with him and Caleb. So, that route on that second touchdown, Colin, where it was almost like a double fake out and slant. He faked the out, faked the slant, that did a little I don't even know what you like.
Because he showed, he stopped, and then he went as if he was going to the outside, he planted his foot, and then he just bursted back inside.
It was nasty.
It was nasty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Keenan Allen is Keenan
That's
Allen.
the type of guy way you want to use him. Just let him go to work with his footwork in one-on-one situations in the slot, and that's exactly what he did there. Alex Amberling, I'm very impressed with Thomas Brown. Yeah, I mean, look, is not great as I feel about the Warren Poles situation, and unfortunately, they're the ones who matter more right now. I'm really impressed with Thomas Brown, to the point where if he's not the Bears head coach, I think there's a real shot he'll get an opportunity somewhere. Now, if they go 0-5 or something here and this falls off the rails, maybe not. But like, even if there's some mixed results with the wins and losses, I mean, he's such a guy who could just command the room, and he's well respected in the league. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this opportunity. I like the Bears this week against the 49ers with the way the Niners are reeling. I think the whole team will just get a boost that most teams get with an interim head coach. But I also think, like, this is more than your typical interim head coach. Like, he's been around the Sean McVays. Like, he's had head coach interviews. Leading is not a challenge for him. Like, that's like, he's born with that. Some guys have to really work at it. Like, that comes natural to him. So I think they'll play hard, especially early on for him. And if the results are – and he straight up said it. He was like, look, when the results aren't there, division happens. Like, I liked a lot of what he said today because he was asked about after the Lions game, and he just made it simple. He was like, look, when the results aren't there, you're gonna see divisiveness. And that's true. And, we heard for over 2 years how great this culture is under Matt Eberflus. You know what culture is? It's winning. Like, culture can't be set until you win first. I think that's what I've learned in this whole process. Like, sure, you're going to bring in your beliefs and your teachings on your players, and you're going to have the standards that you have. But if you're not winning, none of that matters because players are eventually not going to buy into what you're selling. And I think that ultimately became the problem. I think at the end of last year, it's like, okay, like, we blew some games, but this thing seems to be going in a decent direction. If we get a little bit more talent, upgrade at quarterback, all that stuff, maybe that upward mobility could continue, and the opposite happened. And that's kind of what Poles said today. He was like, yeah, we went from 3 to 7 wins, felt like we had some momentum, and that momentum went away with all these close losses, so we had to make a change. The bottom line is you got to bring in someone who knows how to win. And Matt Eberflus never figured that out. In fact, he found ways to lose. Not just like he lost games. He found ways. He manufactured ways to lose, and that just cannot happen. So can Thomas Brown flip that around in a 5-week period? I don't know. But I'm excited to see and find out how he leads this thing. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, process will be big with him. I mean, obviously through – and again, press conferences, media interviews, all that stuff. I mean, it's not the whole job by any means. But, yeah, look, I'm interested to see just how he goes out throughout certain situations. How does he deal when the Bears make a mistake on the field? Like, what's his reaction? What decisions does he make coming out of halftime? Like, what adjustments can he make? Is he able to adapt his game plan given, the week-to-week different defenses that he'll face? Stuff like that, like, I'm going to be really paying attention to because, again, 5 weeks, it's not the biggest sample size in the world, but it's big enough to where, like, hey, you're going to know a decent amount of what you have in this guy. And, with, like you said, Harrison, the biggest coaching search arguably in this franchise's history, you need to make sure no stone's left unturned, including what's right under your nose.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a real opportunity for him to flex his muscle. And, I like his process too. Reporters are trying to poke like, hey, like, are you trying to earn this job permanently? And, I'm sure in the back of his mind, like, he's thinking that could be a possibility. But he's a very, like, day-to-day process-oriented guy. And, he's focused on the moment, which is right now. So we'll see. I'm optimistic about how this goes in the short term. Obviously, I have no idea what it means for his long-term future here, but the next 5 weeks will be interesting. Luke, a first-time super chatter, 2, 3, 4, 5. He says, Vrabel makes too much sense, can do the same offensive defensive swing we've done the last 10 years. We need a professional head coach that is focused on head coaching. Yeah, I mean, look, I've said it. I'll say it again. I would like Vrabel. It feels safe, and maybe going safe is the way to go. He's done the job before. We know he can do it. Things slipped a little bit toward the end. I think they went 13-21 in his final 2 years, but Tannehill started to fall off a cliff, so I think that's part of it. I think Caleb now is, I don't want to say better than Tannehill's peak, but like his highs are certainly better. And, if that can get reined in and be more consistent, he could certainly be a much better quarterback in this league than Ryan Tannehill was. I think the question with any CEO type of hire, maybe Thomas Brown would be that if you gave him the permanent job. I don't know if he'd want to call plays moving forward. I have no idea. is what do the coordinators look like? You know, that's the risk of a CEO hire, Colin, is you're adding more factors, more variables to the situation if you bring in someone who's not going to call plays on either side of the ball.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, say Vrabel gets, both coordinators hired, like, right, chances are they're going to get head coach interviews for other teams as well. So, I mean, you always have to factor that in. And, that's why the allure of Ben Johnson is so just prevalent. Even some other guys that are on the offensive side of the ball, Liam Cohen, hell, even Lincoln Riley, is because you're going to get the play caller aspect with being the head coach. Yeah. So that even way, if your DC gets hired away, it's not as big of a loss as if both coordinators were to. So, look, Vrabel might be the safest head coaching option for the Bears. And again, like you said this numerous times, he's a double. You know what you're going to get. He'll bring a seriousness to this franchise and immediate credibility. But will he give you that just extra, hope and potential of winning, a Super Bowl or two? I mean, that's
look,
question.
As solid as he is, there's a real chance he'd still be the worst coach in this division. Now, I'm not saying there's someone out there that you would feel great about instantly being the best coach in the NFC North. It's such a good group, but you're going to have to compete with some of the best in the league for years to come. So, is Vrabel that guy? He could be. Is he not? I don't know. I definitely think he's someone you should be interested in. Panda Z Grayson, are you buying anything Kevin and Ryan said? We're going to get into this in the first segment here, kind of just my biggest takeaways and, kind of discuss who the hell is in charge, because it just kind of felt like you have to read between the lines of the quotes and the words and the body language. You have to look at the body language. You have to look at how questions are danced around. And I'm going to dive into all that here in a little bit. Poppy Chulo sits, will Chicago be the most attractive head coach opening? Kevin Warren said that. And look, I think it's a bit of a cocky thing to say, but he may not be wrong. To me, it's the best opening right now. I mean, the Saints and the Jets, I get the Bears are run poorly, but out of those three, I'm taking the Bears job if I'm a coach. Now, could you say Dallas is a better job even with Jerry? Probably.
I mean, they're going to be in very interesting cap situation.
Yeah.
Potentially soon.
Yeah. They've had, as much as we make fun of them, though, they've had consistent success, at least in the regular season.
Right. But wouldn't that kind of also deter some head coaches? Hey, I already know what I get with Dak and this kind of whole group, maybe.
Yeah, it could. It could.
I mean, just again, maybe it doesn't. Maybe they want something that's guaranteed so they can establish credibility. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to I'm trying not to just be overconfident in how potentially good this job could be. I do think it's an attractive job for a lot of reasons. I also think there's real reasons to have major concerns especially if you're trying to be a first-time head coach. Do you want to go to this? This is the 5th firing of a head coach in 14 years. I get a lot of these guys are uber confident and they got this far for a reason, but do they want to take their one chance potentially on the Bears, who on average fire a coach every 2.5, 3 years? I mean, I don't know. I think it's fair to wonder that.
It's fair.
The kid is an L7 weenie. I like Zach Taylor if fired as a sneaky hire. FGB, I don't know what FF is, but fire Flus. Flus fired. I'd be interested in Taylor. I don't think he'd be at the top of my list, but the offense ain't the problem. I know that. But they've had some crazy losses this year. The DC hire would be paramount with Zach Taylor.
Yeah, and I don't always trust late game situationally with them.
Yeah.
As much as I do with other teams. Don't get me wrong. I feel like Taylor is a really good offensive mind, but he feels more offensive coordinator-ish than head coach.
It also feels I don't know, this year it kind of just feels Burrow's just out of his mind. Is that Zach Taylor? I mean, I get it all works together, but I'm more impressed, and I get it, the Lions have a ton to work with, but I'm more impressed with Jared Goff continuing to ascend than Burrow. Burrow is, when healthy, is a top 3 quarterback in this league. Jared Goff, as good as he is, no one thinks he's a top 3 quarterback. Like he's like, he's the 7th best quarterback on, and that on his best day or something like that. So, yeah, I'm interested in Zach, but maybe he could be like an OC candidate, Colin, if Vrabel got the job, right? Like
No,
if he
100%.
were to get fired, like he'd be at or near the top of my OC list if he got fired.
No, I said it, straight away. He feels more OC to me. And again, as an offensive mind, he's proven that if you give him weapons, you give him a quarterback that can execute, he can produce really good offenses. I mean, what he's been able to do with, like you said, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, like it's nothing to sneeze at. So I just don't want him necessarily running my entire operation.
I also do think he's in the category of coaches that would probably get a second chance down the road. I mean, multiple conference title appearances, beat Mahomes in a playoff game, made a Super Bowl. But I think he'd be in that category of like he'd probably be better off taking a step back, being an OC for a few years, and then taking a swing at it again in a couple years. Andres Poles definitely looked regretful today. He paused for like 10 seconds when being asked about why Waldron didn't work out. That was not great. We know he's an emotional guy for better or worse. Yeah, and I agree with that. And look, I want a guy who has empathy. I don't want someone who doesn't care. But I also think you had the entire weekend to get ready for this. Like, I think you needed to display a little more strength today. Like, even when Kevin Warren was doing his opening statement for 6, 7, 8 minutes, however long it was, like, he just didn't – I don't know. Like, again, I'm not trying to be overly analytical, like, try to look for something that's wrong. But, like, just sitting there, he didn't seem confident. And one thing we've always known about Poles is, like, he's a confident guy. And I just didn't feel that today. And he had an off day, I don't know, but I don't know. I wanted to see more from him. TJ, I think the Bears will end up with a top 7 pick. They're at 11 right now. I mean, look, the final 5 games, they could easily lose them all. They just proved against the NFC North teams they could beat those teams. I don't know. I feel like they're going to win. If I had to guess, I would say they go 2-3. Just to get, they've played well enough recently, Colin, where they could easily win some games. But is switching head coaches just going to mean you're going to win all games that are close? Probably not. Like, I do think you have a better chance, but doesn't mean all of a sudden, it's close late. We're just gonna, we're gonna handle this situation perfectly. And I think that's where Thomas Brown's going to be judged a lot, Colin. Like, if these games are tight down the stretch, how does he handle situations? Because he's still calling the plays, and he's in charge of the whole team now. So he's got more on his plate at this point than he ever has. So Can he navigate those crunch time situations? And, even if they don't work out, at least the process be sound in his decision-making. So I think that's where Poles and Warren are really going to judge him. Like, hey, if we're going to consider this guy, how does he handle certain situations?
I say 3-2.
Okay.
I think they beat the Niners. I think they beat the Vikings, and they beat FGB last week of the season.
I'll say this. If they beat the Packers, they will consider him heavily, because I know for a fact that the McCaskies really care about that game. So if they beat the Packers and it overall was a net positive over the final 5 weeks, I do think he will get heavy consideration. Now, I don't think a guy should be hired just because you win one game against the Packers, especially considering you'll be almost certainly eliminated from playoff consideration there. But they have not beaten them in 6 years. So if this goes pretty well and they beat Green Bay, especially if it knocks Green Bay down a peg or something in the playoffs, I do think that will carry weight.
They should have beat him the first time. Thanks, Flus.
Dennis, the Chicago kid. Something tells me Bears will go with the safe pick with Vrabel if that's the case. Who does he even bring in to be their OC if TB is gone? Yeah, if Brown's gone, I don't know. Like, do you go like after a Brian Dable if he inevitably gets fired? We just talked about Zach Taylor. Could he be an option? I would like it to be someone who's called plays before. My top choice would be Thomas Brown. I don't know if he would accept that situation. I think he'll have other head coach interviews and at worst have OC opportunities, and he might just say, well, if you're not going to choose me to be the permanent guy, I might just go somewhere else. But, yeah, that'll be critical for Vrabel, because whoever the head coach is, obviously that relationship with Caleb has to be strong. But if the head coach isn't an offensive guy, the OC hire is paramount. We said this last offseason. Once they kept Eberflus, the OC hire is the most important person in the building for 2024. Well, he was a train wreck, and they had to fire him 9 weeks in. So, yeah, that's – again, if you go Vrabel or if you go defense, you're adding an extra variable. Not only do you have to get the head coach right with that person you chose, but you hope that he gets the OC right. So it's adding an extra person there, which is why ideally you go offense. John T. Poles is definitely on X and knows he's getting roasted. I mean, I'm sure he's aware of what's being said on Twitter. Now, I don't think he's gotten nearly as buried as Matt Eberflus has over the last few months, but yeah, I mean, look, these guys aren't dumb, Colin. They hear the outside noise. It's impossible not to in the social media age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think they definitely caught wind of it somehow. And again, we've seen players, delete their social media accounts to try to drown out the noise. But I mean, it's not like they don't hang out with people that do have social media, So it's kind of hard in that way. And look, Poles clearly had mixed feelings about everything that's gone on. I don't think there's any question about it. Now, can he rewrite the ship, and is he the guy moving forward? I mean, ultimately, we'll see. I mean, Kevin Warren said he'll be the GM going forward. Clearly it didn't work. It happens. Now you have to regroup and see, okay, can I right the ship? Because, I mean, this is probably his last chance to get the head coach right. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Kate, Thomas Brown's impressive. I like his no-nonsense approach. He 100% commands the room. If he does well over the next 5 games, he should be in contention to be a permanent head coach. Yeah, I think if he does well these next 5 weeks and not just win-loss, but, commands the respect of the entire locker room and they rally around this guy, I think that's absolutely under consideration for him to be the guy. I don't think you should narrow your search because of that, but I do think he should be someone who's considered.
If he goes 5-0 in this final stretch, and he's impressive the entire way, the players are giving good quotes about him, they seem to be rallying around him, and they just missed the playoffs. I'm giving you a hypothetical scenario.
I mean, I think I'll say this. I think he's the favorite if that happens.
Okay.
If he goes 5-0, players clearly like him, rally around him. Caleb continues to improve. That's important here as well. I think he becomes the favorite at that point. I still think you do a search, but I think he becomes the favorite. I mean, that'd be hard to ignore, dude. You beat all 3 of your division rivals, including in Lambeau Field in Week 18. I know the Niners are reeling, but you fly out west after this chaotic week, win that game, and then you beat Seattle in there as well, which could affect their playoff outlook potentially. So I don't see how you could ignore that. But again, I don't think it's like, well, we're not going to interview anybody. He's the guy. But I do think he probably becomes the favorite under those circumstances. Tricky. As much as I like Poles, if it's true that he went to bat for Eberflus, then he needs to go as well. It's simply too big of a blunder to be overlooked, just my opinion. Look, I said it at the time. When he decided to bring Eberflus back, that created a situation where he could fall on the sword of Matt Eberflus. And it appears he is not. It appears he's staying here. Kevin Warren made it pretty clear that he's the GM. But I'm with you. That's a tough mistake to ignore. It's one thing to hire him when you're a young GM. You've been presented 3 finalists. Even if they tell you can expand the search, you're not trying to piss anybody off. You're like, okay, I'll interview these 3 guys and pick someone. Okay, fair enough. You made a mistake. To bring him back for year 3, Cullen, there were enough signs through 2 seasons that suggested, even if you think this thing is improving, is it ever going to be a guy that you think can win big level games, playoff games? I never once felt that way with Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, no.
I thought you could be a playoff team if the team just keeps improving, but I never thought you could be a high-level contender with him at head coach.
No, and I think that was very evident early on. I mean, obviously, listen, the defense is, at times really good under Matt Eberflus, but there's a big fundamental difference between being a coordinator and being a head coach. And one of those is being, as we saw, very good in situational spots, which Eberflus continued to struggle. One of those is, how do you compete against your division? I mean, I remember the opening press conference where, they said, hey, we're going to take the North and not give it back. Well, the North's still up for grabs as far as I'm concerned. And look, it's
up for grabs between 3 teams,
exactly,
and you're not one of them.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think that leads to some of Poles' defeatedness. And look, and I get it. I would probably feel the same. Like, God, I fucking kept this guy around. We're not where we need to be. I feel like I've made some good moves, but I've clearly missed on some guys. Like, this sucks. Dude, you can feel that way over the weekend. Today, man, I don't know. I like the guy. I think he's made some good roster moves, but I don't want to use the word alarming, but he was just lethargic today, man. I feel like I don't want to say it, but I feel like 2-3 years from now, if he's fired or whatever, I'm gonna look at this Eberflus thing and this presser and all that stuff and be like, yeah, he just never got off the mat there. Kind of like the team since Washington. Just have not got off the mat since that Hail Mary took place. So he's got to wake up, and he's got to wake up fast because, this is it. If you're a GM, you probably get one crack at this thing. So clock's ticking, no question. Aquarius Cook, what's up? Harrison Collin, this is unrelated to the Bears, but I got really stoned last night. Had Taco Bell and White Castle. Now my stomach feels like Pearl Harbor. You got any advice? That is this might be the greatest super chat I've ever received. I would say you could take some Miralax to try to flush your system. You could, Pepto-Bismol? Try to calm the stomach down. Some Tums. Yeah. Chug some water. Try to get some cleanliness in there. That is fantastic, Laquarius.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was last night on a Sunday night. But yeah. Keep on doing you, brother.
Taco Bell and White Castle combo on the same night is
a disastrous combo.
It's kind of next level.
Like, are we talking strict sliders and you somehow threw a crunch wrap in there? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, we need the Laquarius Cook stoned menu.
I would definitely say, hopefully you DoorDashed or ordered in. Hopefully you were responsible and if you're
the double dip DoorDash is a wild move.
It would be. Wise words from a wise man. If you're going to be dumb, be smart about it. So that would be my advice.
Mike Avona, Fanson 75. Time to bring in a no-nonsense coach. First time super from Mike. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I mean, and that's something they talked about too. The type of coach they want is someone who has extremely high standards. That feels like a shot at Matt Eberflus, where maybe at one point they felt like there was a high standard, but that slipped. Yeah, I mean, to me, isn't that kind of just the minimum, though? Like, if you're not hiring a head coach with high standards, I mean, what are you doing? So, yeah, I don't really know what to make of that quote. Stephen Kenny, I know it sounds crazy, but what about Bill Belichick on a short deal with Thomas Brown as OC to prime him to head coach after? The problem, Stephen, is Bill Belichick, he's a guy that if you bring him in, you're going to have to relieve some control. I'm not saying roster decisions necessarily, but, like, he's not just going to, like, first of all, no coach that you bring in should be like, hey, you're the head coach, but this needs to be your offensive coordinator. Like, that's not how you operate. Like, if you don't pick Thomas Brown, the next head coach gets to choose who he wants to bring in. Now, maybe he wants to bring in Thomas Brown. Who knows? But I think Bill Belichick would laugh at you if you were like, hey, we want you to be our head coach, but you have to hire Thomas Brown as the OC. I literally think he would audibly laugh at that suggestion. Like, you're telling me who my offensive coordinator is? So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't get Belichick, although he'd be lower on my list. I am saying is if you do, he's in charge. Like, that's what I'm saying.
I'll flat out say it. I do not think Bill Belichick should be here.
Yeah.
I think.
And that sounds crazy because you haven't won a playoff game in almost 15 years. But it's like, guys, things unraveled quickly without Brady in New England. He's 73 years old.
the next team that he goes to will only be known for the team that he will be the head coach for, that he breaks the all-time wins record for.
Yeah.
That's it. He's not winning anything in this new era of
The
football.
Bears should be above some token award or some token trophy thing of bringing it. Like that's Jacksonville. Like let them go to Jacksonville and get the win total and retire into the sunset. Clintonio, so far I'd like Thomas Brown as head coach. I think they will get this right as long as George McCaskey minds his business. I hope you're right. It's hard to have a ton of confidence, but I hope you're right. Eli, Flores, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just think I think you should interview him, no doubt about it. Can he connect with Caleb Williams? If there's any doubt about that at all, you have to scratch him off your list. And that goes for everyone. And the reason I mention that with Flores every time you guys bring him up is because he did not hit it off with Tua at all. I mean, Tua went on Levitard's show and basically said, imagine waking up every day and being told you suck at your job. Like that just can't, you can't bring in that. And I'm all for old school, hard-nosed, tough guy. Like, I think those are all good traits, but there's a difference between that. You still have to build your guys up, especially a young quarterback who's still learning his way through this league. Yeah. Like, if you're concerned at all that Flores is going to act like that with Caleb, that's kind of a non-starter for me. I don't think that's a sustainable model.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, maybe a potential video idea, and again, just throwing this out here, maybe reasons why I wouldn't hire these coaches for the Chicago Bears.
10 coaches I wouldn't hire, and here's why.
I mean, honestly, might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Rick G., after hearing the press conference, Brown already sounds more like a head coach than Flus ever did. Yeah, I mean, I said that when he talked 3 weeks ago. He sounded better than the other two guys that spoke, and they probably spent all weekend rehearsing what they were going to say. Leadership is not a challenge for Thomas Brown. And I think the reason it's easy for him is because, and guys on the team, players and coaches have described this about him, other coaches around the league, Sean McVay, is he's very direct. So what does that mean? He doesn't screw around. It's easy to respect someone who just tells you like it is. Now, you have to nurture it. Like I just said with Brian Flores, you can't just be like, Caleb, you fucking suck. But he's going to be honest with you. Hey, Caleb, you messed up this play. Here's why. Hey, Jaquan, you missed that tackle. That can't happen. Like, he's not going to BS you. And if you're authentic, that's half the battle. And, with Flus, he just never seemed comfortable in the role. He always made excuses for why certain plays happened. Things didn't work out. Like, Thomas Brown today, Colin, without getting asked, in his opening statement said, I am not exempt from these late game losses. Well, first of all, he was hardly even involved in the Washington one. He was the pass game coordinator. So like on game days, he's got no control over that. He wasn't involved even on this staff last year when it was happening. And I don't think any of us feel like the three divisional ones were on the OC. Maybe the Detroit one, get the play in quicker in that late scramble. But I think we would all agree, Flus has got to step in and take a time out there. But he goes out of his way and say, hey, I'm not exempt in these late game losses. Like sometimes you have to take accountability even when it's not your fault when you're the head coach. Like he said it. This is a results-based business. When you're winning, they'll love you. When they don't, they're gonna want to axe your head off. Like he said it, we signed up for this. Like you can't go soft and make excuses when you're in a high level position in a football organization because this is how it is. Like It's if you want a more cushy, less scrutinized job, go be an accountant. Where you just crunch numbers. So yeah, I appreciate his candor. Not saying that makes him a future Hall of Fame coach, but he's got that part down. The natural ability to lead and be honest is not a challenge for him. So that's a good thing. Isaiah's, Alani's, I think Thomas Brown is our next head coach because he is already making Caleb better. Yeah, look, if Caleb continues to ascend, they play well. If he handles late game situations well, I think that's the key now. Like, if Caleb keeps ascending like he has been, and the decision makings from him from a head coach standpoint, not just an offensive coordinator standpoint, if they're sound, even if they don't work out, that's going to at least show Poles and Warren like, hey, this guy at least knows what to do. He at least is going to make decisions in a quick and timely manner and stand on those decisions. So, if he can pass that test, that'll give him a real shot, I think. Marcus, thoughts on Eric Bieniemy as OC possibly? I mean, it depends who the head coach is. He's down at UCLA now. I don't know how he's viewed in NFL circles at this point. It went okay in Washington when he finally got the full-time chance to call plays. I mean, he had Sam Howell, so I don't know how much. I mean, Sam Howell threw for 4,000 yards. He also threw like 22 picks. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he makes the jump back to the NFL. I'm not sure. Clintonio, I hope they involve Caleb in the next head coach hire. That was briefly discussed today. Poles said, he didn't dance around the question, but he kind of towed that line of like, he basically was like, he's not going to pick the next coach, but he didn't like close the book on like involving him in terms of like getting input from him and stuff like that. And they should at least get input from him. And quite frankly, some of the other veteran leaders, like what does Jalen Johnson think? Clearly they valued him going nuclear on Flus to the point where they fired him. Like, I think getting opinions from your big-time players is always a good thing. Now, you got to make it clear, like, these are your decisions, but, clearly your process up to this point hasn't worked, so I think you got to be open to anything. A lot of super chats. Thank you guys so much. We're still going to get into the bulk of the content shortly, so stick with us here on Chicago Bears Now. He says, I'm kind of interested in Eric Washington calling the defense. Yeah, that was revealed today. Chris Beatty was elevated to offensive coordinator. He was the receivers coach. Now Brown's going to call the plays, but Beatty would help with the game planning. I would guess he's going to be the one sitting up top now in the booth and kind of give Thomas that bird's eye view and, offer input on certain things during these games, because obviously you're losing that with Thomas Brown being on the field. He's not up in the booth seeing the whole field anymore. So obviously that's going to be an adjustment as well. Anthony, Niner fans want Shanahan gone, which is crazy, but he should definitely be at the top of the list, and maybe he'll bring in Saleh as DC. Look, if Shanahan is somehow available, that's a no-brainer. You throw the kitchen sink at him to try and get him in here. Like, if you want to change the narrative around your franchise, George McCaskey, if he frees up, you tell Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, the checkbook is open for Kyle Shanahan. You go make that happen. Because say what you want about Shanny. Close games, late game, yeah, blah, blah, blah. That guy gives you such a high floor as an organization. And Caleb will be the most talented quarterback he's worked with, maybe ever. Like, that to me, that's like and look, you're going to be competing with a lot of teams if that happens, but you open up the bank if that guy becomes available. And if you don't, you're just not to be taken seriously. Period, end of story. So,
no doubt about it.
Dylan V, with Brisker's help up in the air and Byer playing like a below-average player, do you think there's a big hole at safety going into next season? I'm curious to see how Byard plays the final 5 weeks, because I thought earlier in the season, and he's still grading out pretty well per PFF. It slipped a little bit, but he's still in the 70s or higher across the board. But I thought earlier in the year he was playing at a not all pro level, but I was like, okay, like the second half in Philly last year, like he's back to closer to what he was before that. Like, is he a player, Cullen, that just like gave up a little bit of the rope because he just was not buying what Flus was selling? Like, that's possible. That's a guy who's been around the NFL 8-9 years. He's like, this guy's a joke. I mean, he said it after the Washington game. He was basically like, yeah, I told Eberflus I would have defended it differently. Talking about the last 2 plays. So, like, he's one of these leader types. I don't think he quit, but, like, I think it's natural for some complacency to sit in. I'm very curious as much over these next 5 weeks, Colin, to see how the defense responds after losing Matt Eberflus, not just how, Caleb and the offense continue to play.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's something to keep monitoring, and Yeah, it's very tough. I mean, obviously, under Eric Washington, we'll see how everything kind of plays out and how, this defense and each individual player, reacts to it. I'm looking more towards Tyreek Stevenson. Will he be able to kind of right in the ship and regain that kind of outside cornerback spot? But, I mean, this secondary we looked at earlier in the season as being one of the best in the NFL. And, I mean, now safety could be potential, target for the Bears in free agency in the draft. So
I'll say this: if Byard struggles the rest of the way, you're going to have to add a safety probably because – Brisker's a question mark moving forward. And by the way, have you been following Brisker at all? The day after Eberflus was fired, he tweeted, "Back on the grass, feel great."
Yep.
I think there's something more there. Did him and Flus have a falling out, and Flus just put him on IR or something? I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that situation, but there was a point late last year and early into the season, unless I'm misremembering, Brisker and Flus seemed pretty tight, and clearly by the end, Brisker hated the guy, and that seemed to shift after the concussion.
Yep.
Was he upset with how he handled the concussion? I don't know. Something is off. I wonder if there's ever going to be January 15th, there's just someone reports on the fallout there between Brisker and Eberflus, once the offseason gets here, because there's clearly something more going on there that the public does not know about.
I agree. Yeah, it's something to just keep your eye on too. And I mean, again, with all those concussions and everything,
it'll be telling. Colin, he has one more week where he has to be on IR. If he returns, that'll be pretty telling.
Yes.
Because when they put him on IR, I was like, oh, he's done. They're shutting him down for the year. If he comes back and plays the final 4 games, you're kind of telling us there was something with Flus in him. At least that's my read on the situation. So,
I don't know what else you could make of it. He magically somehow,
he didn't clear protocol for 7 weeks, but in week 11 he did.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
The timing would be interesting on that one.
Yeah, Stephen Kinney. Caleb needs 270. I think it's 277 a game, but I hear you. Reach 4,000. Prediction where he ends up. Love the content. I think he'll likely be in that 3,700, 38 range. I mean, 277 a game against some of these opponents they're going up against, that's going to be tough. I think if he hit that 250 threshold per game the rest of the way, that on average, that'd be a pretty good number. We'll see where it ends up. I'm not too focused on chasing, volume, yardage stats. I just want him to keep improving, keep making good decisions, tighten up the consistency on the accuracy, which has been kind of up and down throughout the season. So I like where he's at right now. I like that he seems to have this ability to fight through adversity, not just with the chaos within the organization, but within these games. I mean, first half against Detroit, he couldn't hit, he could throw the ball in the ocean if he was standing on the beach. Second half, he's just making plays. So, I think mentally he's handled all this stuff pretty well. He'll talk to the media on Wednesday. That'll be interesting to see what he has to say. But, the Bears got to nurture this thing properly, Cullen, because he's holding up his end of the bargain with this whole thing. You've got to get, convincing him is going to be tough, but you got to do your best to kind of just rein him in and be like, look, we're going to get this figured out. This is about building around you so you can lead this team. Which is why, I mean, you have to pick the right coach.
Absolutely.
It's not an option.
No.
If you don't, he's going to be gone in a couple of years. Even if he's playing well, he might just say, I'm not staying here. I'm not doing that. So you gotta get this right, and you gotta nurture this kid, and you don't give him the keys to the franchise, but
he is your future.
He's the reason you think you can go places. So you better make him understand that is the case. So we'll see if they're able to. Bum of Wall Street, have a weird feeling we went out and go to the playoffs. I just don't think 9-8 is going to get you there. Washington's already at 8 wins, and they have the head-to-head over you. What's going to be frustrating, Colin, is if they go 4-1 or something. It's if you would have done this after New England, this season could have been salvaged. It was crystal clear. It was for me and for a lot of people, it was clear after last season. But it was clear after the duds in Arizona and against New England after the Hail Mary when you fell to 4-5, it's like, this thing's done. Eberflus is not the answer. If you would have done it then instead of just the half measure with Waldron, we'll never know, but the season was not you weren't out of touch in terms of the playoff picture. At 4-8 now, even if you win out and get to 9-8, you need Washington to either lose out or you have to win some kind of three-way tiebreaker, right? That's just not.
It's not realistic.
You're too far back. I don't think 9 gets you in this year.
Yeah.
Let's just look at Washington's schedule, 8-5. I know they haven't played as great recently. Played better yesterday.
Yeah, they were
played pretty well yesterday. I mean, at Saints, Eagles at home. Let's give that a loss. So that would be their 6th loss. Falcons at home, at the Cowboys. At Saints, Falcons at home, at Cowboys. I mean, they're going to lose 2 out of 3 there. I mean, they could, but even if they just win 1, they're at 9, so you can't have the head-to-head tiebreak, which means you need a third team to get to 9-8, and you have to win a 3-way tiebreaker. It's just not a realistic scenario, which doesn't even add the part where the Bears have to go 5-0.
Exactly.
I think they'll play better, but the schedule's pretty tough here. So, be cool, be awesome if it happened, but I wouldn't bank on it. Clintonio, I'd pay to have been in that locker room after the loss. I tweeted this out after the Jalen Johnson stuff came out. I would pay a significant amount of money to have footage, even just audio of that locker room after the game, because, and I'm not even saying it from I just want to hear more people shitting on Flus standpoint, just to get inside knowledge of just how bad it got. Because clearly, and Poles even acknowledged today, he was asked, how did that carry weight in deciding to fire Eberflus, and he kind of said, yeah, knowing the pulse of the locker room is always going to be critical. In other words, yeah, that was, if nothing else, part of the final straw of one of our team leaders, team captains, highest paid players in the league, basically going nuclear on the coach. There's no coming back from that. So, yeah, it's unfortunate it played out this way, but it's about moving forward, and I'm not saying you should trust the Bears because you probably shouldn't, but we just got to hope that this time they get it right, and we'll see if they do. All right. Appreciate the Super Chats. Pretty much an hour worth of Super Chats that we just answered here. We still got a lot more to go. We're going to give my reaction, some of the top takeaways from the pressers today. We will do a formal mailbag, kind of a 10, 15-minute segment there. Hashtag Bears or Super Chat to get your questions on the show. You can ask about the coaching search, polls, the current team right here and now, what the rest of the season looks like. Any questions, all are on limits, or nothing's off limits, I should say, so fire away. And then I did cook up a Bears mock draft, my second Bears mock draft of the season, following the firing of Matt Eberflus. So we'll dive into all that and more coming up here on Chicago Bears Now. I'm Harrison Graham. This is Chicago Bears Now, and on today's show, I react to the press conferences that took place today at Halas Hall. We heard from Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles in a joint press conference, and then they were followed by interim head coach Thomas Brown. So I've got some takeaways to that coming up here on the show. But listen, we are trying to continue to grow this channel at a rapid pace, and we've been growing like crazy thanks to all of you. Couldn't do it without passionate Bears fans. If there's one thing I agree with Kevin Warren today, the Bears have the best fans in the world. Why else do we keep showing up? Why would we if this wasn't a passionate fan base? So appreciate all of you. If you want daily and free Bears content here on this channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on notification. We're trying to get to our next milestone, 111,000 subscribers. All right, let's get to some takeaways from the presser. We kind of knew this already, but Kevin Warren confirmed it that Ryan Poles will be staying on as the team's general manager. I'm kind of on the fence on what they should have done there. I'm indifferent. I think Poles has done some good things. I think being overly loyal to Matt Eberflus is borderline inexcusable. So, if they wanted to make a change there, I would have been on board with that. I'm okay with him getting kind of a fresh beginning at a full head coaching search. I know he ultimately picked Matt Eberflus, but by the time he was hired, Flus was one of 3 finalists. He probably didn't feel super comfortable re-expanding that search at the time. So now he he gets to start fresh from the beginning. But again, if they wanted to make a change at GM, I would not have pushed back against it. And that brings us to this. And I think this is the most important thing from this video. So if you're dozing off, if you're watching at night, listen up for the next few minutes because I think this is the most important thing for this team right now. Who is in charge? Period. But also who is in charge of this head coaching search? Kevin Warren said this. Ryan Poles is the general manager of the Chicago Bears and will remain general manager of the Chicago Bears. Ryan will serve as our point person on our search for head coach. We will work in tandem. That was part of his opening statement. So, we all were like, okay, so this is Ryan Poles' show. Like, Kevin will obviously be involved. He said they're going to work daily together in this process, but Poles will be the point person. That tells me, okay, he's in charge. He has the final say. Well, later on, someone followed up and asked a question, like, what if there's a debate? What if you're down to two coaches, you feel strongly about one, Ryan feels strongly about one? And he kind of said a bunch of words like Poles is in charge of the football operations, the GM, yada, yada, yada. He eventually got to Poles would have final say, but he didn't say it initially. And you just kind of watch and you listen, and I've been doing this long enough to kind of read between the lines. I'm not sure I believe Kevin Warren when he says that Ryan Poles would have final say, when he says that he will be the point person. Like, if he wanted to make that clear that Poles is in charge, he could have just been more clear about it. Now, is that just him having an ego and wanting to, put him on himself in that pedestal lore as well, but not to the point where he says that Poles is not in charge of football? I don't know. Is he trying to thread some needle there? Possibly. But I just have this funny feeling that if it really comes down to it, if it's a tough call between a couple of guys, I think Kevin Warren, if he wanted to, could pull the trigger on who the next head coach would be. Now, in a perfect world, they interview 10 guys, 12 guys, and they feel strongly about one guy, and that's who they pick. And I think both of them truly believe that. But I don't know if I buy this whole thing like, yeah, we're going to work together. Poles is the point person, though. He would make the final choice if it came down to it. I think that's kind of what he has to say. I'm not sure I believe him. I'm not sure either of them know or have even talked to each other about it specifically. Like, hey, what if scenario A, B, C, and D happen? What do we do? Like, and I get it. It's early on here, but I wish we got a clearer answer today on the pecking order of who's leading this search, because words are one thing, but lengthy answers that kind of are vague for a lot of it, I don't know. I don't think that's crystal cut. I'll just say that. Who's running this search? Who do you think is in charge? Type RP for Ryan Poles, KW for Kevin Warren. I'll say this. Kevin Warren spoke first and spoke for about 10 minutes, and then Ryan Poles, who we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, was kind of lethargic today. He only spoke for a couple minutes before opening the questions. I think in general, who's in charge is Kevin Warren. Maybe Poles will have final say on the head coach thing, but Kevin Warren felt more like I'm the guy running this team than Ryan Poles did today. Let's kind of shut the door on Matt Eberflus, complete that book. Why was Matt Eberflus fired? Well, it really came down to one simple thing, and we all know the answer from the outside, but they said it themselves. Ryan Poles said it himself, and we'll get to that answer here in just a moment. But first, we got to tell you about our sponsor, Game Time, where you can get last-minute tickets for the lowest prices guaranteed. Are you looking to go to a sporting event like a Bears game, a Bulls game, a Blackhawks game, a concert, a comedy show? You looking to get off the couch this winter and get out and about and go have a good time? Well, you're going to have to buy your tickets online, and Game Time is the place to do it. Make sure you use their newest feature, Game Time Picks, to help kind of filter out the thousands of tickets that are available for all these events. They'll give you different price points throughout the venue and kind of narrow your search, and you can figure out based on your budget what the best opportunities for, whether it is for a sporting event, concert, or anything else. Game Time shows you views from the seat so you can see the exact vantage point you'll be sitting in, and especially if you're in a stadium for the first time, you want to know if it's a good seat or not, and they've got those photos for you, so that is absolutely fantastic. They promise you The lowest price is guaranteed. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So if you're going to wait till the day before the event, day of event, you could get the best price available. They have super deals, which sometimes gives you discounts on certain seats as well, kind of the best bang for your buck. It's just an awesome app, and it makes purchasing tickets much, much easier and smoother. Create an account today by going to Game Time. Download the app, search Game Time in your app store. There's a link in the comments and description. Use promo code ChatSports to get $20 off your first purchase only. Terms do apply there. That's code ChatSports for $20 off your first purchase only. What time is it? It's game time. Get out and about. Ryan Poles said this, and it's just obvious. We came up short too many times. And he kind of expanded on it later. These late game losses are why we made a change. He said we had to make a change. And, what really stood out to me from Poles today is I don't think his energy was good at all. And I think we can overanalyze press conferences. I remember Nick Sirianni had one of the worst ever, and I still have questions about him, but clearly they're winning. It's working. Dan Campbell's was kind of bizarre. And I get it. I think we overanalyze him. But Matt Eberflus is one we overanalyzed, and for 2.5 years, we never had confidence in him. So sometimes you're just right. And Ryan Poles is never a guy I've questioned in terms of his ability to command a room, to communicate. He was hesitant on some answers. He was asked about why the Shane Waldron thing didn't work out. He had to pause for 10 seconds before giving that answer. When Warren was giving his opening presser, he was just sitting there, kind of slumped shoulders, like the body language was poor. Like, I get it. He knows he failed with Matt Eberflus. You made that decision Friday. You moved on Friday. Take the weekend, kind of, spend time with family, all that stuff. Get that out of your system, because come Monday, I need your game face on. It was not on today. Maybe you had an off day. I don't know, but that was underwhelming. That was disappointing from the general manager of this football team. Now, maybe he's been told behind the scenes, this is Kevin Warren's show. We're keeping you around, but, you'll have input, but Kevin's got final say despite saying the opposite today. Maybe he knows he's screwed. I don't know. But I think I saw a tweet about this. Can you at least pretend you want to be there? Like, this thing is falling off the rails. Fans need something to believe in, and I don't know how they could believe in the energy from Ryan Poles right now, because there was none at that press conference. All right, a couple more things here. The goal of the next head coach. What are the Bears looking for in their next head coach? There's reports over the weekend, we need a leader of men, yada, yada, yada. Here's what Kevin Warren had to say. Quote, we need an individual who has extremely high standards, is demanding, who creates an environment of accountability, I think that word was intentional, and is a sound decision maker, among other things. So the opposite of Matt Eberflus. Sound decision maker, Flus was not. Accountable, Flus was not. Very demanding. I think Flus, his principles of attitude, effort, all that stuff, clearly, at least by the end, that wasn't there anymore. I agree with what they're saying, but don't you always look for that? Aren't all those attributes on the list of every team what they're looking for when they hire a head coach? I'm not saying come out and say, yeah, we want an offensive guy. How about, hey, we want a guy that is going to change the narrative around here with his leadership ability, and we want a guy that can connect with Caleb Williams and take him to the next level. Now, they later added hey, we need someone who can develop Caleb. That will be paramount, so I appreciated that. But, this isn't that difficult. Oh, we want a guy who can lead. Well, yeah, no shit. He's the head coach. That goes without saying. So I'm not saying, it's a bad answer. I'm just saying it doesn't really add anything. You should want all those things anytime you hire someone who's taken over a leadership position. If you had to guess who will be the next Bears head coach, drop a name in the comment section of this video right now. Is it Thomas Brown, the current interim? Because I'll say this, he checks a lot of the boxes they mentioned. Let us know right now. Speaking of who, Thomas Brown. Look, we've said it. I'll continue to say it. This guy's impressive, man. This guy's impressive. This guy's gone from pass game coordinator to offensive coordinator to head coach in less than 3 weeks. That's a lot to take on, even for a guy who's been an assistant head coach, who's been an OC, who's risen in the rank. He went from having a small role to you're in charge in less than 3 weeks. That's not a normal situation, even for typical interims. Most interims, one of the coordinators just takes over. That's not the case here. I know he was the offensive coordinator the last 3 weeks, But I'll say this. Out of the three who talked today, you know who I believed in the most? You know who stood out the most to me? Thomas Brown. Energy is there. Directness is there. He spoke very clearly and concise, but not to a point where he was boring. He was interesting. I just think that this is a guy that these players are going to rally around. Now, is he going to get the full-time gig? Should he? That remains to be seen. But it is a little concerning that the guy you come out being most confident in after today is the guy you don't even know will be here in 5 weeks. Not the other two that you know are going to be here and that are in charge of getting the next head coach. That is a bit of a concern. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm excited for this opportunity for Thomas Brown. He's highly regarded throughout the NFL. And, Warren and Poles, I almost wonder if they just are looking for reasons to keep this guy because they don't want to screw up picking the wrong guy. So we'll see what happens. I like his here and now approach. He said he's not worried about 5 weeks from now. I'm sure in the back of his head he's thinking, man, if I ball out here, I could get a head coaching job here or somewhere else. But he knows that's a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute process. There's no shortcuts. So we'll see how the players respond. There's been reports that the players have already responded well to it. I think a lot of that is just getting Flus out of the building. But the work starts now. You got this 5-week period to see what Thomas Brown could do. All right, there you have it. My top takeaways from today's Bears press conferences. Just a couple of other notes, by the way. Chris Beatty takes over as the offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown will call plays. I would guess Beatty is up in the coach's box, given that bird's eye view since Brown will now be on the sideline. Eric Washington will take over as the defensive play caller. And so those I's are dotted and those T's are crossed from a, coaching role standpoint for the rest of this season. My name is Harrison Graham. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys next time. All right, we got a mailbag coming up. Hashtag Bears or Super Chat to get your questions on the show. Hashtag Bears or Super Chat. Sorry, I got to send a text message here. All right.
Yeah, get your all's hashtags in or Super Chat. And speaking of Super Chats, Harry.
Yeah, I saw this come in. We were mid-segment. Oh, yeah. A first-timer.
Yeah, a first-timer. Because they did work to, begin the show today.
Yeah.
This guy took it to a whole nother level.
This one's rolling in from Sunny Boy. Boom! And I said 50 to get on the helmet. I'm going to give you a 2 here with it being a $100 super chat. He says, what's your opinion on each rookie quarterback so far? How would you rate their season so far from worst to best? I think this class has been pretty good, and every team is satisfied with their pick. I think you nailed it at the end. I don't think any of the teams are upset with who they got. I would say I think Caleb's highs have been the highest, but I also think he's probably been the most inconsistent. Drake May has looked pretty good, honestly. He's been kind of like Caleb with the ups and downs, but his highs have been very high. Jaden was the most consistent. Then he hit a wall. Seems like he kind of bounced back last week. So, I guess you would probably say he's had the best rookie season, although Bo Nix has closed that gap after a slow start. They kind of did the opposite, where Bo started slow, but now he's picked it up. But I think this class could end up being really good, Colin. Like I'll put it this way. I don't think the Bears, if you're wondering if I think the Bears picked the wrong guy, the answer is no. But I also don't think the other teams are upset with who they have. Like I think all 4 of the guys that have played this year, I think the teams have to be pretty happy, right? I mean, I don't think any of them would be like, oh God, this is bad. So, obviously we haven't seen Penix really at all, although I wonder if that's coming with Cousins struggles, and then McCarthy's been hurt, so we'll see on those two. But I mean, that's my 2 cents on it at least. Yeah,
I think, a class that this class could get compared to, and honestly the really last class where we've had this many guys like
2 stickers, Sonny Boy, new helmet.
where we had this many guys like succeed this early is 2020, where you had Burrow, you had Tua, you had Herbert, you had Jordan Love, and then you had Jalen Hurts, of course, in the second round.
Yep.
Now, there's some similarities with each class. I mean, obviously, Jordan Love didn't start right away. Michael Penix didn't start right away for Atlanta. You obviously had Caleb, number one, who been up and down a little bit. I mean, Burrow was pretty good out the gate and everything, but if you look at all the 5 of those guys, I mean, they have now turned themselves into franchise guys, obviously at varying different levels, but yeah, I mean, there's a chance that this class, I mean, that's the class they're going to be kind of compared to and / competing with, so.
Yeah, I don't think any of these guys have just been off the charts exceptional, but I don't think anyone who's being fair would say, oh, this guy's got bust written all over. Like, I think they've all played well enough to be like, yeah, I feel pretty good about him as long as he continues to improve and take steps forward. So, yeah, it's hard to pick who the best has been, but, I think all have been pretty solid in their own right. Let's talk about it. TV says Flus deserves another year. I don't know if Flus was Ryan's first choice. Poles has done an amazing job with player personnel. You sound crazy being on the fence. I don't know if on the fence. I more have just said I would understand if they wanted to make a change. But I think amazing at player personnel is a push. It is a reach. I think he's done a good job. I mean, the roster was atrocious when he tore it down to the studs, which he had to do. And I think he's done a good job. But we can't act like there haven't been more than 1 or 2 misses in there. And I appreciate a guy who takes calculated swings. Justin Fields had no receivers in 2022. They tried to take a swing with Claypool. It flopped. That happens. I think the Montez Sweat one went pretty well. He hasn't had a great year, but I think that's more due to injury. So, kind of 1 for 2 there on those big midseason trades. He trades Roquan Smith because he can't work out a contract, which, look, I'm not saying you had to make him the highest paid off-ball linebacker. I didn't necessarily blame him. But then you turn around and pay Tremaine Edmonds 90% of what the Ravens paid Roquan Smith, and he's not 90% of the player that Roquan Smith is. Nate Davis, again, I appreciate trying to bolster the offensive line. A guy that doesn't help you at all. And again, these aren't all necessarily Poles' fault. It's not, he brings in the players and then the coaches and players together have to mesh and make it work. But the bottom line is that's how you get judged as a GM, how players perform and does the team start winning. You're not winning. It's year 3. So, I think he's done a good job with player personnel. I don't think great. The trade with Carolina was a really, really good one. You needed some luck for that to happen. I think if you take the Eberflus part out of it, I would probably give him a B- grade. It's better than a C. It's definitely not an A. You've got a good roster, not a great roster. You're still trending up, I think, with your roster. But you've had some misses in there, no doubt about it. You factor in the Eberflus part, you're down into that C- range. Not just picking him, but bringing him back for a 3rd year. And, who knows if we'll ever have every single detail of, did he have full pass? I don't know. But based on what we know and what he has said publicly about Flus, I think today with his body language, clearly he's still upset that it didn't work with Flus. He at least liked the guy. I think if you look at the whole picture, it's been up and down for Poles. And I've been one of the biggest Poles defenders, but you see some of this play out over time, you're like, he's missed a lot. He hasn't completely fixed the offensive line. I think he's done a decent job with, the tackle position, but is Braxton Jones long-term answer? You found him in the 5th round. Awesome, but I think that's 50-50. I think Darnell Wright's a good player. I don't know if he's an all-pro. The interior's been a mess. Coleman Shelton's played better recently, and that probably, in the end, for what you paid for him, was a pretty good value signing. But we can't just be like, the roster is awesome. It's good. It's not special, though. Eberflus was underachieving with it, but I don't think I think saying, Colin, that he's done amazing with player personnel. The Lions have done amazing with player personnel, right?
100%.
There's levels to this, as the kids would say. I think he's done a nice job, but it hasn't been incredible. And that's okay. I'm not expecting incredible. But we got to analyze these things and call them for what it is. It's been a mixed bag. It's been a mixed bag.
That it has, yeah. And speaking of Roquan Smith, he just got announced as the leading vote getter for the Pro Bowl this year, or at least among his position.
And I'm okay not wanting to make an off-ball linebacker like your highest-paid player 3 months, 6 months on the job, whatever. But why did you turn around and give Tremaine Edmonds 85-90% of the Roquan contract?
Panic, maybe.
Like,
maybe just like, hey,
is that a guy Eberflus identified? Like, hey, we think he's a better fit in our defense? Because there was a thing when Roquan played a few games, like maybe he's not the ideal lead linebacker for this specific system. He's more, he goes back to Baltimore, which is the 3-4. Maybe that's a more natural fit. But it's like, to me, Roquan Smith is like, you plug him in, he's got to be a top 5 off-ball linebacker in the league in any system. Tremaine Edmonds is not that. Sorry. Like, I get it. You banked on athletic upside, Cullen, but, like, to me, that's a guy if you're going to go that route. Roquan got 20-21. You give Tremaine 18 a year? Right. Like, that's at the time, Tremaine should have probably gotten like 14, 15 a year. And even at that number, he hasn't played up to that point. So, I'm not trying to tear the guy down. I think he's done some good things, but we got to be honest about this stuff. Like, it's been a mixed bag when it comes to Ryan Poles. It just has.
100%.
Sonny, a different Sonny. Someone find out the average age for Super Bowl winning head coaches. All the young head coaches are overrated. Experience is a big piece of the pie. Well, Matt Eberflus was in his early mid-50s when you hired him. So, Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl when he was, 38, 39 years old? Sean McVay won one at 35, 36 years old. Like, I feel like, Sonny, you're getting caught up in, like, Belichick and Andy Reid winning, 70% of the Super Bowls in the last 15 years. John Harbaugh, when he won in 2012, what was he, probably late 40s?
Somewhere around
back
there.
then. He wasn't young, but he wasn't 55. I think John Harbaugh is early 60s now, so he was probably around 48, 50 when he won that Super Bowl.
Harbaugh's 62.
So that was February 2013?
Yeah.
So it'll be 12 years ago in February. Yeah, he's 50.
Yeah.
Again, not old or not young, but I get it. Experience in most things in life helps, but are you saying you want to bring in Belichick? Are you saying, I don't know. I get what you're saying, and obviously when you hire a 35-year-old guy, you're taking a risk there. That's a big responsibility for someone that age, but if you hit, you might have a guy for 20 years. So we'll see. Cameron, why can't I select to send more than 500? YouTube maxes you at 500. I don't know if you're talking a big game or not, but if you want to wow us, if that's what you're going for, I just put my Venmo and Cash App in the chat. You can send over there whatever price you see fit. But yeah, YouTube caps at 500, Cameron, on an individual stream and an individual super chat. So appreciate the donation in that regard. All right. All in Daphne, press conference looked like a lawyer, father, and spoiled son who got caught up. Also, Caleb is the guy. He improves during the game. Draft middle linebacker and center. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too. Linebacker, you might need to add a guy. Safety, you might need to add a guy. So, again, I think the roster's in a better place, clearly, than it was a couple years ago, but there's still a ways to go. Now, maybe new coaching elevates some of these current players. Maybe Tremaine Edmonds will play better under a different guy. I don't know. But to me, he's been an average player making almost $20 million per year, which just can't happen. Your high-paid guys have to be big-time players. Marcus, to this point, how do you grade passing on Carter to draft Darnell Wright, even though Carter had issues? I don't know. That's one I'll still give Poles a bit of a pass. Not a pass, but I understand why that happened. Because Philly could afford to take that gamble with the amount of talent they had and just the proven, leadership in that locker room. Who is kind of taking Jalen Carter under his wings last year? I mean, I guess a guy like Andrew Billings, but I don't think the Bears could afford to take that risk, because if it doesn't work, you've just completely whiffed on a top 10 pick. It'd be one thing if Darnell Wright had just been a shitty player, but he's been arguably the best offensive lineman from that draft. And he's not special, but he's pretty good. Like Darnell Wright, at this point, I feel pretty confident in saying he will be a second contract guy here. And look, you got Dexter too, and Dexter's not Carter, but he's a solid starter. So, we'll see. If Jalen Carter ends up being a Hall of Famer, obviously, there's going to always be some level of what if. But there were real red flags there, depending on what type of locker room he went into. So that's one I more so, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I understand why he did it, I guess is what I would say when it comes to Jalen Carter. All right, hashtag Bears, Super Chat. Get your questions on the show. We'll dive into a mailbag episode here. We'll get to It's Coda on this mailbag here in a second. And then coming up in 15 minutes or so, we'll get into Bears Mock Draft 2.0. Let's get it. It's mailbag time here on Chicago Bears Now. I'm Harrison Graham. Tank forever. I hope not. Eventually you just want to win. Why should Bears fans be hopeful with all of the chaos and dysfunction? Well, I think it's fair to just make this statement off the bat. You should have some doubt on the leadership of this organization and their ability to choose the right head coach. That is a very valid thing. But what I would say is the reason to have hope is because of number 18, is because of Caleb Williams. Obviously, it's been an up and down year. It hasn't been perfect. But you've seen legitimate, not just flashes, stretches of greatness throughout some of these games. Throughout, games on top of games. He's had 2-3 game stretches now where he's legitimately played awesome. Now, over the course of 17 games, the great ones play well for, at least 12 or 13 of those. And even when they play poorly, they at least keep you in most of these games. But these 3 games against the NFC North the last few weeks, that 3-game stretch before the bye week, but most importantly, this last 3 weeks, it gives you hope that, hey, this guy's different. Justin Fields, I think, under better circumstances could have been a starter in this league, but he doesn't have the talent of Caleb Williams. Mitch Trubisky, I think we knew early on that at best he was kind of a game manager. Caleb Williams is much more. So that's the reason to be hopeful, is because of number 18. The question is this. Can he rise above the chaos? Is he so good and special if he reaches his potential? Can he, overcome some of the shortcomings of this organization? Type Y for yes, type in for no. If the answer is a lot of it he can, then I think there's reason for hope, even if the organization isn't run completely perfectly. It's Coda. Bill Belichick is head coach. Brown remains as OC. I just don't think you're not going to tell Belichick who to hire. Now, maybe he would choose to keep Thomas Brown, but I'm not super high on the Belichick thing. He's 73. I feel like he would want to just change a bunch of things up, which clearly you need some change, but he might just be like, yeah, these 10 players got to go. And it's well, Bill, we paid this guy. We did that. I don't know. I just don't think the Bears and Belichick are the right fit. And I know that sounds crazy. The Bears haven't won a playoff game in almost 15 years, but I think he's better suited to go somewhere else. M. Xavier 91, I'm on the Thomas Brown train. Who is with me? Definitely on it in the short term. I think this was absolutely the right move to fire Eberflus and promote Thomas Brown, give him this 5-game runway and see what he can do with it. I'm open-minded to him eventually becoming the head coach. If I'm sitting here today, would I bet that it happens or bet against it? I'd probably bet against it, but I'm open to him proving that he can be the guy, and it all starts this week at practice and then on Sunday against the 49ers, a game that I think is very winnable right now against the Niners team that might just be done. So I'm excited for him, curious to see what he can do. And he's gone from pass game coordinator to OC to head coach in less than 3 weeks. So let's see how he handles it. Subscribe and join us for that game as we will be live for a Bears versus 49ers watch party this Sunday, 2:15 Central Time for a 3:25 kick. How does Thomas Brown's debut go? Most teams get a boost with the interim head coach. And as painful as these losses have been, I actually think the Bears have been playing better than the Niners recently. So come join us for that. Josh, if you retain Thomas Brown, who is on your short list for OC and DC? It's hard to just answer that off the cuff here. Do some of the guys currently on staff stay? I would think maybe a few do, but I would hope Thomas Brown brings in some fresh blood as well. It's hard to say. If he's calling the plays, the OC hire, what becomes more important is someone who you trust with the game planning, right? If Chris Beatty shows them a lot over these next few weeks and Thomas wants to keep calling plays, maybe you just keep him, right? That could be an option because, if you're hiring an OC for someone that's not going to be the play caller, it's just going to limit your pool. Maybe you go poach a quarterbacks coach from the McVay tree, which Brown comes from as well. You give him the OC title, something like that. He also works with the quarterbacks, so that could be an option. Defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh would be on my short list. I know it would be a scheme shift, but I think you got to be just open-minded to proven good coaches. Beyond that, I have to think of some other potential defensive guys, but I'll put some thought into that, Josh. How about that? The Greenier Bros, would you re-sign Tevin Jenkins or let him walk? I'm open to re-signing him, but it's got to be team-friendly. I don't think you can give him top dollar. Like, if some team out there is wanting to give him, $18-20 million per year, thanks for the 4 years, Tevin, but too many injuries. And sometimes he randomly will have poor performances. I did not think he played that well against Detroit, if I'm being completely honest with you. So, can you get him on like a 2-year, $20 million deal, $10 million per year, something like that? I'd be open to that. But if he's wanting one of these, 4 for 80, 5 for 95 type of contracts, I don't think the Bears are in position to do that, if I'm being completely honest. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring this mailbag episode here on Chicago Bears Now. PrizePicks is the best daily fantasy sports app in North America with more than 10 million users and counting, and it's available in more than 30 states. Get signed up today at prizepicks.com/CLNS. When you use our code CLNS, if you're a first-time customer, you're going to get a $50 bonus directly into your account once you play for just $5. So set your first lineup, 2 or more players, as long as it's 2 players on different teams. And doesn't matter if you win or lose, you're going to get that additional $50. Hopefully you do win, and you win that entry money as well. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS to take advantage of that deal. Here's an example of a lineup, just 2 players. I got Josh Jacobs, more than half a touchdown. I like him to find the end zone this week. That's a goblin pick, which is a little easier to win. I kind of paired it with a demon pick, which is tougher to hit. I got Jamison Williams finding the end zone as well. 2-player entries are typically 5 for 15, and this one is as well, with having 1 goblin and 1 demon pick to kind of even itself out. $5 entry to win $15, but again, you're going to get a $50 bonus into your account regardless when you play for the first time. So check it out right now. Links in the comments and in the description of this video. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS right now. TJ, if we lose out, do you still think there's a chance they fire Ryan Poles? I think the organization is already having a what's the word I'm looking for? Phrase I'm looking for? A kind of a brand issue right now. I think if you come, they already botched how they fired Matt Eberflus. There's already reporting out there from Adam Johns and others that people around the league did not like the way they handled that in terms of Flus doing the press conference and then being fired 2 hours later. Now, Kevin Warren said they hadn't decided by then and said if he could, they would have handled it better, but you can't go back. Like that already happened. I don't think you can now, 5 weeks left in the season, say Ryan Poles is our GM moving forward and then change your mind in 5 weeks. Like, I just don't think people will take you seriously. So I think he's here. I think he's going to be here, and that's just how it is. Dylan Peterson, what are some good free agents that you think the Bears would go get? I think we should get someone like O-line or D-line. Trenches. That's what I'm looking for, Dylan. If you're watching live here on Monday, I've got a mock draft coming up. A little teaser. We got some trenches picks in there, so stay tuned for that. Who will be the next Bears head coach? If you had to predict it, drop a name down in the comment section below. Who is going to be the next Bears football coach? Jacob Savani, do you truly believe Chicago would be Ben Johnson's most coveted opening? I have no idea. I know Adam Schefter said he believes Johnson would be interested in this job, Albert Breer said the chatter last year was that Johnson would have had interest in this job if it opened up. I think out of the three that are open right now, which is the Bears, the Saints, and the Jets, Chicago is the most attractive because of Caleb Williams, draft capital, cap space, all that stuff. But does he trust the organization? Does he trust Ryan Poles? Does he trust Kevin Warren? Those are all, like, if I'm being interviewed by the Bears, I'm also interviewing the Bears. Like, I want to know crystal clear what the structure of this organization is before I take that job if I'm a head coach candidate. Wasim, the Caleb slander in the chat is insane. Yeah, look, it's this is just what happens, right? When you're losing, people turn to coaching and the quarterback who to blame. I like where Caleb's at right now. I think if he had it back, he would have done a better job late in that game against Detroit. Would have gone faster, but that's where the coach, the adult, has to step in and take a timeout. Didn't happen. Hopefully he learned from that situation as well. Like, hey, we got to have more urgency. But I think Caleb has done some good things this year. Cranes make gains. Our sack leader only has 4.5 sacks so far. Is Flus to blame for poor performance scheme, or does Montez just need more help? I think it's a combination of things. I don't think Montez has had his best year. I think part of that's due to injury. There could be other reasons. I do think you need more talent on your defensive line. And I also think that it's the coordinator's job to be more creative, to find ways to generate pressure, bring more blitzes, run more stunts. I mean, have they run a stunt with their front four in the last several weeks? I can't think of one. Run more twists. It's just been very vanilla. Just rush up field with 4 and try to get home. It's been pretty lethargic in terms of the approach. We'll see if Eric Washington turns up the heat. I'm curious to see what he does as well. We're all focused on Thomas Brown, but what does Eric Washington do with this opportunity as the interim defensive coordinator? That's something to watch out for. Appreciate all the questions. A lot of good ones there. If you have any more, I have a lot of DMs to catch up on after the Flus firing. I did not dig into that due to the holidays and Thanksgiving time, but got to play some catch up here. At HGram NFL, Twitter and Instagram is where you can find me. Fire away in those DMs. I can only imagine, Colin, because I actually have not. I've done a little of my Twitter DMs, but not Instagram. How many DMs I got of just people saying, they fired him, they fired him. You know what? I'll just look now. I bet it's over 50. And this isn't like a clout thing. I just know how Bears fans are.
Guilty as charged. When the news broke, I spam called Harrison twice before he had to put in our work
like
group
4
chat.
y'all called me, so I just answered the first one.
Yeah. Just being like, hey, it's happening.
So it looks like it's right about 40. So I oversold it by about 10. But yeah, people were excited at that news, to say the least. Who do you guys think is going to be the next head coach? Kevin says, if Marcus Freeman is hired, I'm done. Yeah, I did a video on that this morning. That makes me nervous. Not that he couldn't be the guy. A guy who's never coached at the NFL level, I just think it's too big of a risk right now.
He also seems like a CEO type that I get that his identity is like toughness and defense, but
yeah, and he clearly seems like a strong leader type, which obviously you need, but like that goes without saying. Like he's also had some like weird losses. Like they lost to Marshall his first year, they lost to Northern Illinois this year. Yep. You just fired a guy for having weird like I'm not saying that's the only reason. Like, clearly he's done a good job. Like, they're going to be in the playoff this year. I think they're a team that could win a game or two. But that seems like too big of a risk. And, sure, he might be the next big thing. But, like, there's risk in every hire. But, like, I think there's levels of risk. Like, I'd rather take the risk on Ben Johnson. Like, what if he's not – what if he can't command the – well, you should feel pretty good about whether he can or cannot in the interview, and you know he can coach in some capacity at this level. So, I don't know. I'm not opposed to getting to know him if you're the Bears, but if he's like if he's your one of your top 3 or 4 targets, I just think there's guys out there that you should consider before him. That's all.
I'll throw this at you because I keep seeing people in the chat and people were asking questions on the mailbag and everything of they wanted to keep Thomas Brown, but they wanted to keep Thomas Brown as the OC. Which head coach candidate do you think could get hired and Thomas Brown would stay around as the OC, if anybody, in your opinion?
First of all, I got to put this ghost guy, not in permanent timeout, but I'm going to hit him with a little 5 minutes. Let's scale it back a little bit. Sorry, ask me that again.
So I've seen a lot of people in our chat basically say they want to keep Thomas Brown, but they want to keep him as an OC. We saw it in the mailbag and everything. Mm-hmm. Is there a head coach candidate out there that you would think Thomas Brown would stay the OC for, if anybody, in your opinion?
I don't know if it's so much for who the head coach is. That would obviously play a role. I think it's more of what other opportunities would be out there. Obviously, if there's a head coach opportunity, he would take that. But, you know, let's say he has 2 or 3 OC options out there. Would he stay with the Bears, even though deep down he'd probably feel like he deserves the head coach opportunity? You would think no. I wouldn't rule it out, though, if he felt good about where he and Caleb were, because you could kind of spin it as, well, this sucks, I didn't get the gig, but if we have a big year in 25, I'm going to be a top candidate in the next cycle. Like, I will have had head coaching experience as an interim. I will have interviewed in several cycles, and I will have helped develop this guy into becoming a high-level player. That would be pretty strong. So while I think it would be unlikely that he would return as an OC, I wouldn't completely dismiss it, but I do think if you're the Bears, if you're like, we want to keep this guy, but we don't want to make him the head coach, you have to come to the conclusion that you're willing to lose him. Because if you don't make him the head coach, I'd say it's 80% chance he's going to be elsewhere because, A, the new head coach doesn't have to keep him, and B, he doesn't have to stay even if you want him to. So, I wouldn't completely rule it out. Maybe a Vrabel type would make sense because he's more of a CEO, hands-off, just more of a kind of galvanizer type. Maybe if Vrabel was like, hey, man, I'm handing you the keys. Keep doing what you're doing offensively. I think he'd be open to it. But, again, it would depend on other opportunities. And I think he'll get head coach interviews, regardless, because, I think he's already shown the league, he can handle quick change pretty well here. He's had 2 promotions in less than 3 weeks. So, as long as this thing isn't a train wreck over the final 5 weeks, I do think teams will have interest in him. So, obviously, got to see how it goes. But, he seems like someone who's in control, and that's step number 1. All right, the next step for us here is unveiling my latest mock draft here on Chicago Bears Now. Did one during the bye week when the Bears were 4-2. Different times, better times. Now they're 4-8, and it's time for another mock. So let's get into it here on Chicago Bears Now. It's time for my second Bears 2025 mock draft after the firing of Matt Eberflus. The last time we did a Bears mock, my first one of the year, the Bears were 4-2, rolling heading into the bye week. Since then, they have lost 6 games and have fired their head coach. My name is Harrison Graham. We're going to get into this 5-round mock draft here in just a moment. But before we do that, do you want more Bears draft content? Obviously, the primary focus right now is 2 things. A, the rest of the season content with that, and B, the coaching search, because that's getting going here. But if you want more Bears draft content, hit that like button. If you don't, tell us what type of content you'd like to see in the comment section below. All right, Bears mock draft 2.0, round 1, pick 11, Will Campbell, the offensive lineman out of LSU. And you might be thinking, Harrison, Campbell falls to 11? Yeah, I think he's taken a little bit of a step back this year. Now, he's had a good year. I don't think he's some bad player all of a sudden, but I don't think he's been quite as good. I also think just other players have ascended, to the top of people's draft board. So there's a scenario he falls to the latter part of the top 10 and even outside of the top 10. When you run these mock draft simulators, I'd say about half the time he's available at pick number 11, which is where the Bears sit right now. Dane Brugler had this to say about Will Campbell. He said his lack of ideal length will be an issue for some teams. Scout believe his arms will measure right around 33 inches at the combine, which is kind of the minimum threshold for offensive tackles for those in the NFL. There are exceptions, but that's typical. I'm keeping him at tackle until he shows he can't do it. But even if he moves to the interior, he is still the best offensive lineman in this draft. And that's what intrigues me about Will Campbell, is because you have Braxton Jones under contract for one more year. I think Braxton Jones is a flawed player. He's had some minor injuries. You can bull rush him. He's not a perfect player. But I think he's a starter in this league, and you have him under contract for one more year. So do you want to create another hole on your roster by punting on him after this year? Or do you draft a Will Campbell if he's available, play him at guard, and move him to tackle in year 2, or maybe Braxton shows he's a long-term answer and you keep Campbell at guard? I think that's what Will Campbell does. He gives you options. If you get rid of Jones or he beats Jones out at left tackle, hey, great, so be it. He's your left tackle. If not, you can kind of Tyler Smith him like the Cowboys did when they still had Tyron Smith, make him a guard, and maybe he's just awesome at guard. And with shorter arms, that might be a better spot for him. So you're going to need some interior help on the offensive line. So I like the flexibility of Will Campbell and his ability to kick in there and play if that's the route the Bears wanted to go. All right, round 2, pick number 37. This one from the Carolina Panthers. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. He's having a hell of a year. Most view him as a late first, early second. He fell to 37 here. Again, I'd say about half the time he's available when you run these mocks. If he continues to ascend and has a big playoff, he'll probably go in the first round. But here in early December, I still think there's a scenario where he's available at the spot. Teams don't value tight ends super high typically in drafts. This kid is awesome. I mean, he is Penn State's offense. Almost 1,000 yards receiving. They use him as a runner. He kind of reminds me of how Georgia used Brock Bowers, where they would use him on jet sweeps and stuff like that. That's what Warren does, 10 total touchdowns. He's an okay blocker. You'd like him to be better there, but I think tight end is a sneaky position of need. Obviously, Cole Kmet's a very good player, and I'm not saying you need to have someone replace him, but you've gotten absolutely nothing out of Gerald Everett. Mercedes Lewis is 40 years old, and you pair this guy with Cole Kmet, that's one of the best duos in the league. And to me, I still think you need to be open-minded to BPA, best player available, when you go through this, and that would be what this is. And we don't know what the future of Keenan Allen is. If you lose him, well, maybe adding a guy like this in the draft, maybe that kind of is his replacement, even though it's a different position. Maybe you go cheaper at number 3 receiver in free agency or something like that, and you run a lot of 2 tight end sets, which, depending on the type of offense, a lot of those McVay, Shanahan type of offenses run 12 personnel anyway, and you haven't been able to do that as much as you'd like because Gerald Everett's been a total no-show this year. That has not worked out. So if Tyler Warren's there at 37 and you're picking there, I'd be pretty tempted because the guy is a hell of a ball player. Would you be okay taking Tyler Warren if he's sitting there in the second round? Type Y for yes, you would. Type N for no, you wouldn't. I would, because you still need good players. And oh, by the way, this thing still needs to be about Caleb Williams, and this guy would help Caleb Williams. All right, round 2, pick number 43, the Bears' own second-round pick. Jack Sawyer, the edge out of Ohio State. He's really well-rounded. He's never going to be the best pass rusher in the NFL, but he's steady against the run, and he plays with a lot of passion. His pass rush win rate's been really good this year, just under 20%, which is solid as well. Again, I don't think this is a guy who 3 years from now is having 12 sacks a year, but I think he can be in that 8-sack range once he reaches his potential. Maybe he pushes for 10 sacks some seasons, and he sets the edge as an edge runner, and he plays a lot of snaps, and is just a vocal leader. He's the type of guy that fits the Bears historically, right? Just a hard-nosed type of player that wants to play every down. He's not the most talented, but he's talented enough, and he's a very physical player. So I like what he brings to the table in terms of intangibles, and his tangibles are still pretty good. He's 6'5", probably going to be about 260. All right, Tate Ratledge, kind of similar, but on the offensive side, not the most athletic, not the best mover, but a leader. I saw him kind of rein in Carson Beck in a game recently after Beck started slow. He kind of calmed him down on the side. I think it was in that Georgia Tech game where things were going terribly, and Beck kind of figured it out in the second half and got back together. He's missed some games this year with an injury, but he's kind of an old-school guard, more of a mauler. I don't think he's going to test amazingly well. We know Poles values that, so maybe he wouldn't Tate Ratledge, but I think he's a starting caliber guard in the NFL. If not in year 1, down the road. Maybe he's competing for your last offensive line job this year. Say you do get Will Campbell and you plug him at guard and Tevin Jenkins is walked, maybe you re-sign Matt Pryor and he competes with Tate Ratledge, right? Something like that where make the best man win for your 5th and final starting offensive lineman. So, again, I think you got to focus on the trenches. You got to add players who can beef up your offensive and defensive line. And clearly that's been my focus with this mock draft. All right, a couple more picks to go as we did a 5-round mock. Before we get to those, though, get started with Rocket Money. The best financial app out there to stay on top of your expenses is Rocket Money. You can they'll help you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Did you know that most Americans think they're spending about $62 per year on subscriptions when that number is closer to $300? I didn't believe it. And then when I started with Rocket Money, I had all kinds of subscriptions and services I was paying for that I either A, wasn't using anymore, or B, didn't even remember signing up for in the first place. Probably signed up for it one time for some free trial for some show that I wanted to check out and then totally forgot, and I've been getting charged for it ever since. You can save tons of money as they will help you cancel those subscriptions you no longer want. You can identify which ones you want to cancel, and a few clicks later, they will get that done for you as they will be the ones who deal with customer service. Check out Rocket Money today. Download the app by using our link. It helps supports us, and then you'll support yourself by doing it at rocketmoney.com/bears. Now, tons of other benefits as well, staying on top of your credit score, just your overall banking. I think it's better than most banking apps that I've used in the past, and you can even negotiate to lower your bills by up to 20%. Just send a photo of your bill to Rocket Money, and they'll try to find better offers for you. rocketmoney.com/bears. Now, stop wasting money. You can save up to $740 per year by using its full features at rocketmoney.com/bears now. I said 2 more picks. 1 more pick here. Trevor Etienne, the 5th round pick, number 147 overall out of Georgia. I do think you're going to have to add a running back this offseason. You got DeAndre Swift, you got Roquan. I think it's a solid one too, but I don't view Travis Homer as someone who will be back. Obviously, Khalil Herbert, Velus Jones are gone. So, taking a guy on day 3 makes some sense. Etienne does a little bit of everything. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. Spent 2 years at Florida, this year at Georgia. He hasn't been like a bell cow style, but he could play on all 3 downs if you need him to. You know who he reminds me of? And I'm not just saying it because of Georgia. He kind of just reminds me of DeAndre Swift. Like, he's not going to be a top 10 running back in the NFL, but I think in a certain situation in the future, he could start. If not, he could at least be a good change of pace back. He catches the ball well. He runs the ball well. Not a great pass protector, but again, you're on day 3 here, so you're kind of choosing what you got. This is a pretty deep running back class. I think you can find a guy in the 5th, maybe even 6th round that can give you real snaps as a rookie. Couple reminders: the Bears don't currently have a 4th round pick, and they probably won't, unless they make trades in the offseason, whatever, because they traded theirs away last year to trade back into the draft to get Austin Booker. Also, the Justin Fields pick from Pittsburgh at this point is likely to be a 6th round pick. Unless Russ were to get hurt in the next couple of weeks, he will play more snaps than Fields, which means that'll stay a 6th round pick, not be a 4th round pick. Only doing a 5 round mock right now because these simulators don't have deep analysis all the way into the 7th round. So there you have it. Trenches heavy: Will Campbell, Tyler Warren, Jack Sawyer, Tate Ratledge, and then adding a running back there in Trevor Etienne as the Bears look to add some good players this upcoming April. How would you grade Bears Mock Draft 2.0, A, B, C, D, or F? Drop a letter grade for us down in the comment section below. You never know how these are going to fall when you run these simulations, but I think filled some needs there, and we'll see how Ryan Poles attacks this offseason, starting with free agency, obviously. Okay, that's going to do it here on Chicago Bears Now. Again, if you want more draft content, hit that like button. If you want to support the show in another way, hit that subscribe button as well. My name is Harrison Graham. We'll see you soon. Bear down. All right. Well, my laptop died, Colin, so if there's any super chats or anything, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Left my charger in the other room, but we're wrapping up anyway, so no biggie.
No biggie.
No biggie. Got Marcus. What was your reaction Saturday on Ryan Day? I did a little short on 4 Verts, my other channel, about it. I mean, that was just, to lose that game, I mean, that's an embarrassment. Like, this, I mean, let's be honest, Colin. Michigan kind of punted this year. They finally broke through, won the Natty, had like 18 guys go to the NFL, didn't even add a quarterback in the portal, and did not have a quarterback all season. Their quarterback, who's a walk-on, threw for 62 yards and 2 picks. They were 6-5. You had them at home, and you lose 13-10. That's the only road game Michigan won all season. I mean, I really think Ryan Day, I think if he doesn't at least make the national championship game, they're going to fire him after the year. I really do. I just don't. I know he's very good. I know he's one of the, worst case, he's a top 10 coach. But they went from beating Michigan 15 out of 16 years to losing 4 straight, and this time to a team that punted on the year where you spent like $25 million in NIL. I don't know how he overcomes that, Colin, unless they make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally it. It's how far you can make it in the postseason will determine if he keeps his job or not.
And
I'm done with Ryan Day.
That kind of seems unfair, but like...
Here's the thing, too. It's like...
I don't know. He also saw a brawl ensue, and he was just kind of standing there. Like, I'm not saying he needs to, like, get in there and be yanking guys, but, like, he just seemed like... I think he was so stunned at what happened in the game, he just didn't even know how to act. I mean, that was bad, man.
It was very bad.
Michigan looked like the team who had more to play for.
If you're the head coach of Ohio State, and again, with the new teams moving over, you're basically asked to beat, as a head coach, you're asked to beat Michigan, Penn State, now Oregon, and I guess USC if they ever get their shit together.
And look, you're not going to beat these guys every year.
Right.
But 4 in a row and you lose to a bad Michigan team at home, they're a bad team. Their top 2 players were out. Will Johnson and Colson Loveland were injured. They did not play.
This was the worst Michigan team pre-Harbaugh. Since pre-Harbaugh, I should say.
Yeah, this is the worst team they've had since Brady Hoke.
Yeah.
Man,
I agree.
That's
it's not great.
It'd be one thing if it was on the road and there was some crazy weather or something, but sure, it was cold, but you were at home.
100%.
Disaster. Moss Tanker, how did Flus go from rallying the latter part of last year, except for Detroit, to, what we saw? I never seen decision-making so bad. I mean, dude, even in that stretch last year, it wasn't just Detroit, it was Cleveland. He dropped Justin Jones into coverage on 3rd and 15 and got burned. We saw this last year. I get it. They won some games down the stretch. But other than beating Detroit at home, and this was after they blew the game in Detroit. They should have swept them last year. But other than beating Detroit at home, second half of last year, what game did they win that was impressive? And don't say Minnesota on the road when they beat Josh Dobbs 12-10. That's not impressive to me. And that was one of his 2 wins he had above 500 teams when the game kicked off. And by the way, that Minnesota team finished 7-10. So what was impressive for beating Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals, warm weather Cardinals at home? For beating the Falcons and Desmond Ridder at home? I get it. They won some games. Other than beating Detroit at home, they did not beat a single team they were not supposed to beat. So, and it only got worse this year. I do agree that they were trending better at the end of last year, but not to the point, if they would have beaten Green Bay in Week 18 to knock them out of the playoffs, I'd have been like, okay, that's a significant win. But they got run. It was 17-9, but you got outgained by 200 yards. So, yeah, the signs were there last year. It just got worse this year, Moz Tanker, because the expectations were higher. I think that's the only difference.
Some NFL news just to round out the show. Christian McCaffrey, it is confirmed he had a PCL injury.
Done for the
He will
year.
Go on injured reserve and will be out at least 6 weeks.
Jordan Mason on IR, too.
Yep, with an ankle injury.
I think the Bears are going to win this game. I think the Niners are punting. I think they're done. It would not shock me, Colin, if Shanahan and Lynch met this morning and were just like, this season's done. Anybody who's kind of hurt, let's put them on IR. Now, I get they're only 2 games back in the division, so I get it, but I don't view them as a team that can do damage this year.
On the flip side, Brock Purdy will practice fully this week with a shoulder injury.
If you beat the 49ers, does that help you get Kyle Shanahan? I don't think they're firing Shanahan.
No.
But
I can dream.
a man
can't
can
I?
dream. Man can dream. All right, we're out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Busy day at Halas Hall. We'll be back tomorrow with some more content. We'll, of course, go live Thursday as well. He's Colin Brown. I'm Harrison Graham. We'll see you guys soon. Peace.